Hello, people. I'm here to talk to you about counterclaims and rebuttals if you were gone on the day that we talked about them in class, which was Tuesday. Of course, if this video is used in future school years, that comment won't matter. Anyways, counterclaims and rebuttals, they're parts of argument essays, okay? The first thing to understand is what a claim is. The claim is your perspective. You're the author. It says the perspective, position, or viewpoint held by the author. When you write the argumentative essay, you are the author. So it is your perspective, your position, your viewpoint, your opinion, or your understanding of an issue, okay? So it might be something like red is the best color. That's your perspective, right? You could maybe make an argument for that. Of course, everyone agrees that that's not an important issue, what the best color is. It's so subjective, it's not actually that important, so no one would actually be interested in reading that essay. Well, people might be, but that'd be your claim, right? Now, if you've been here while we talked about syllogisms, you know it's the conclusion of a stacked syllogism, which is where we make a syllogism, we make another syllogism, and then we take the two conclusions of those two syllogisms, right? Or the one conclusion from each syllogism, and we put them up next to each other and let those be our two new premises, and it forms a third conclusion, and that's going to be like our super conclusion. We call that a stacked syllogism, and that's going to be your claim. It's also the thesis, right? In an informative essay, we've talked about how the thesis is the key idea. It's what you're trying to prove in your essay, right? Same thing. Claim, thesis, pretty much interchangeable. Some people say, no, there's a significant difference. I don't know. I think they're interchangeable. The other thing to understand is a counterclaim, right? The counterclaim is the argument that opposes the essay's claim. So if your claim is red is the best color, a counterclaim would be, no, blue is the best color, right? It's totally opposite of yours. If your claim is school should be shortened to 6 hours long, right? There are a number of counterclaims that could be said in response, like, no, school should remain as it is, or school should be longer, or school should be shortened to 6.5, or school should be shortened even more to 3 hours, right? Anything that is a different viewpoint, right, an opposite or even alternate perspective is going to be a counterclaim. It's the anti-claim. It's the thing that goes against what you're saying. It's got to be the same issue, though, right? If you say school should be shortened to 6 hours and someone says, actually, blue is the best color, that doesn't make any sense at all, right? That's a totally different issue. So you have to argue about the same issue, and the counterclaim is a different stance on the same issue. The way I like to think about rebuttals is that it's a response to the counterclaim, but the counterclaim is a response to the claim, right? So if you make a claim, red is the best color, right? And someone says, but blue is actually better for these reasons, right? They just said but to you in the counterclaim. So what you have to do is rebut or butt back, right? We got one but, you need to butt again or rebut. It's the second but. Red's the best color, but blue is really good for these reasons. And then you say, but blue is actually bad for these other reasons, and that makes red even better. Okay, so you respond to the counterclaim, you butt their butt, you have to defeat their logic. So whatever their reasoning is, whatever their evidence is, whatever logic they used to get from their evidence to their conclusion, you need to defeat it. You need to show why the logic is faulty, why the evidence is not trustworthy, why it's just not as good as your stance, right? Because your stance is supposed to be stronger based on what you write in the rebuttal. You're supposed to reinforce your own position, and that's what the rebuttal says, right? Red's the best color. Well, blue's the best color. Well, if I show why blue actually can't be the best color, I'm giving people more reasons to believe what I say and less reasons to believe what the other person says. Fewer reasons, okay? So here's an example. I'm not going to give you the whole article, but here's an example from the New York Times, an article called How to Help Americans Eat Less Junk Food. Okay, I've got two authors. And in the beginning, they present this problem. There's little reliable guidance available for people who don't have this time, practice, or skill to analyze the dense nutrition labels on food packaging. That's a direct quote from that article. And what they're basically saying is, our food in America, we have these nutrition labels that tells us how much sugar, how much sodium, how much of trans fats there are, all this stuff, right? But people don't understand what that means. I see something and it says 14 grams of sodium. Okay, is that too much? Is that not an, I don't know. Then they added percentages of recommended daily value. Okay, well, that might be helpful, but then they say, oh, but there are 19 servings in this box. How do I eat 1/19 of a box? It gets confusing. It's complicated. People don't understand the nutrition labels, so if they want to be healthy, our current system isn't good enough. That's the problem. That's a good thing to introduce in the introduction paragraph. Set the stakes. Tell us why this is important. The solution that they propose in their article, here's a direct quote. What could help is a system giving consumers important nutrition information at a glance, which means they can just look at it and know immediately. Important info at a glance, and put it on the front of the package, a warning sign that a high sugar soda or breakfast cereal product, for example, is an unhealthy choice. So a big yellow caution triangle that says high sugar, right? Something like that makes it very obvious that this is bad for you, so that everyone can tell what's good for you and what's bad for you, and they can make good decisions about what they're eating, okay? That's their solution. If people can't tell what's healthy for them, we'll make it obvious. Now, this is the counterclaim and rebuttal paragraph in the New York Times article, okay? First, notice what they do. They present the opposite side of the argument, and then they defeat it. They butt back, okay? So what they write, as you might expect, food manufacturers, that's who is disagreeing with them, food manufacturers will surely go to the mat, meaning fight, to stop warning labels from being required. They already are arguing, and that's a link, so we know that they're giving us evidence, right? That you can go see their arguments. They already are arguing that these plans would be costly, it would cost them money, and that these costs would be passed on to consumers. So the people making the food are going to lose money because people aren't going to buy it as much because it's labeled as unhealthy. So they're going to have to charge more for their product if they want to stay in business, and that means that people who do buy it will have to pay more for it, so it's bad for everyone. But then they butt back. They say, but, right in the middle of this paragraph, but research conducted soon after, now again, that's a link, right? So we can go see their research. They're using evidence in their rebuttal. But research conducted soon after Chile's food labeling and advertising law passed, right? So it sounds like in Chile, they had a similar law where they put these warning labels on packages, and soon after that law passed and this happened, there was research done, and it showed no effects on aggregate employment. Aggregate is a bunch of different things put together, right? Employment, how many people they can employ. So people weren't really losing their jobs, right? No effect on employment. They didn't have to fire people because they weren't making enough money. And negligible effects. Negligible means it's too small to matter, okay? No effects on employment, negligible effects on wages, which is how much people get paid, and profit margins, how much the company's actually making. Negligible effects of the food and beverage sectors, even as consumer consumption of unhealthy foods declined. So in other words, people stopped buying unhealthy foods, but the food manufacturers didn't have to fire anybody. They didn't really lose any money. If they had to make people get paid a little bit less, it wasn't really much less. It was very, very small adjustments, right? So the reason this is a good counterclaim, a good rebuttal, is that they take the actual issue that the counterclaim is concerned about and they address it directly. Because in the counterclaim, the main concern was money, right? It'll be costly for us. It'll be costly for the customers, right? And they said, well, let's fight back. Let's butt back and say, but in Chile, they already did this. And so when we look at how it went for them, we can expect similar results for us. Their money didn't drop that much. They didn't lose much profit at all. Their employees are doing just fine. Sounds like everything's doing great. What they didn't address is the consumers, right? But really, the consumer thing is really just what the food manufacturers are throwing in. They don't care about how much money you have in your bank account. They don't even care if you're healthy. They just want your money. So they're saying, hey, you're not going to lose any money. We know that's what you really care about, so don't worry about it. That's a good rebuttal, okay? So these are counterclaims and rebuttals. Notice again the evidence, right? These are hyperlinks. Of course, in an essay, we don't use hyperlinks. We use parentheses at the end of the sentence, and we put the last name of the author in those parentheses so that it'll match the first word in our works cited page. If they don't match, then it's not actually helpful, right? But I hope this makes sense what an essay should do in regards to claim, counterclaim, and rebuttal. If I can recap, okay, the claim, U.S. foods should be clearly and consistently labeled so consumers know how healthy or unhealthy a product is, okay? Okay, that's a claim. Maybe some people would disagree. Some people do disagree. The food manufacturers say labeling unhealthy foods would be costly for food companies and also consumers. But the original authors, they butt back. They say Chile uses these labels, and there were little to no effects on employment, wages, or profit margins, even though people started buying healthier food, right? So, pretty good argument, right? Let's look at another example. Claim, cell phones should be banned from schools because they distract from learning. Okay, that's one opinion. People could disagree. Counterclaim, some say that students should be allowed to carry cell phones for emergency purposes. Okay, that's a pretty reasonable concern, I think. If someone were to make that argument, I'd say, if you're concerned about what to do in an emergency, that's a good concern. What to do in an emergency, right? And they even started that sentence with "some say" to show that it wasn't their opinion, whoever this author is, okay? And they say that's a valid concern. Rebuttal, though, there are plenty of other less disruptive ways for parents and students to communicate, right? There are protocols in place when there's an emergency. If the parents need their students, they can come to school and we'll just give them their students. We're not going to say, no, you can't have your kid, unless we're in a lockdown or something, right? But there are other ways to do it. Let's look at another example. Someone says, everyone should eat chocolate ice cream. Okay, it's a bold claim. Counterclaim, some people are allergic to chocolate. Reasonable concern, right? People who are allergic to chocolate probably shouldn't eat chocolate ice cream, right? But if someone really believes in this cause, really, really believes it, they say everyone should eat chocolate ice cream. So, if people are allergic, here's my response, here's my solution. Rebuttal. Today's ice cream manufacturers can use artificial ingredients to duplicate the flavor of chocolate so that people who are allergic are able to eat chocolate ice cream without risking an allergic reaction. Okay? That's a fair rebuttal. Someone who thinks that everyone really should. It's best, it's good, it's morally right for everyone to eat ice cream. Their solution is fake chocolate flavor, and that way everyone can eat it, even if you're allergic. Okay? I hope these examples are helpful. I hope these all make sense. In your Knight's Quill packet, if you're in my class, I've given you a bunch of sentence starters for ways to start counterclaims and start rebuttals. That should definitely help you. Here are a few more. Feel free to write these down. Many people believe that cell phones should not be banned. This argument is wrong because there are other ways that parents can communicate with students, right? So we got a counter argument and rebuttal sentence starters. So I would recommend adding those to your Knight's Quill, your writing guide for my class. And if you don't want to add them, you don't have to. There are a bunch in there, but do what you can. Essay 3 is an argumentative essay, so we'll really be using this a lot, these ingredients. So keep this in mind. We'll talk more about it in class, but if you are gone or you're just struggling, I hope this is helpful. If you need more help, come talk to me. Otherwise, see you in class. Bye.